Hello, Flat Earth researchers, debaters and debunkers. This video, titled The Flat Earth Movement and Personality by Dr. Todd Grande, is worth a look at. It'd be interesting to hear what this gentleman has to say and maybe offer up some responses. I believe he was asked to give his professional opinion on the whole Flat Earth movement, as it's been labelled, and the personalities within it, which is something that I've enjoyed studying since the start and well before. I think the Flat Earth does reveal a great deal about human nature and our behaviours and beliefs, as well as the different kinds of personalities that comprise the human race. So this should be quite interesting to comment on. So let's first of all just have a quick look at who this guy is. He is a counsellor, basically. Counsellor education and supervision is what he does. He's done lots of videos. He's obviously well versed in the whole theme of psychology and personality disorders and behavioural science, I suppose. Lots of vids here. Do mothers with borderline cause borderline in their children? I suppose that's going to say borderline personality disorder, and we'll see a lot of this use of the word borderline, which is kind of interesting. And I think most of his videos, I've had a quick look at a few of them, seem to be attempts at defining what these terms actually mean, trying to add some clarification to the labels. And of course there are many labels that go with the grey areas of the problems we face. Interesting though that I should imagine most of the people that have these kinds of problems, whether it's he's talking about antisocial behaviour here, or just mental disorders, basically. I would assume that 99.9% of the people that he refers to or deals with believe they live on a spinning ball Earth. So we have entire societies that live with this belief that we're on a globe Earth, and a lot of mental issues within those societies, or cultures as it were. Just an interesting thing to think about as we go into this. Anyway, rather than me rambling, let's hear what this guy has to say, and I will butt in when I feel necessary or compelled to do so.
Today I wanted to answer a question that I received about the Flat Earth movement and what possible personality profile might we see associated with it, or mental health symptoms. So in case you don't know, the Flat Earth movement, this is a group that believes that the Earth is flat as opposed to spherical. And this isn't something that they're doing just to be funny or to kind of mix things up. Many of the members of this group actually believe the Earth is flat. So there's
Okay, I'm not sure if the word movement is appropriate, to be honest. It's more of a realization. It's not necessarily a group, or it's a growing group, but it's a group of very individual people. Flat Earthers are as diverse as the rest of the population. So yeah, movement may not be the right word, and belief is already been used a few times in the first few sentences. No, it's not a belief. I think it's a realization that we're not on a spinning globe going around the sun, as has been impressed upon us. Apart from that, any flat earther who's completely honest with themselves will admit that that's about as much as we know, that we can ascertain from everything we've been told, but there is no real way of finding out for ourselves the true extent of the dimensions of this Earth. Anyway, I'm maybe jumping ahead of myself.
There's a real conviction here in terms of belief. This is something that they actually believe. Now first, it's important to point out here that I can't and won't diagnose anybody who's not my client. So really here I'm just speculating about what we might see in terms of personality or mental health symptoms with some people that have this belief. There could be people that are members of that movement who have no mental health disorders and have a personality profile that's within normal limits, whatever normal is. So that's an important.
That's a good point he actually makes there, whatever normal is. How do you define normal in this very crazy world that is filled with psychopaths and narcissists and people of all kinds of faiths and ideologies? So, yeah, he's right to say that normal is not necessarily something you can really define. But obviously his job, his job is talking about abnormalities. So there is obviously somewhere some idea of what's normal in a person.
Place to start. Something else I find interesting about this movement is, one of the curiosities here, is I didn't even know before I heard about this that there was debate over whether the Earth was flat or spherical. I didn't know this was a thing. Usually when you hear about what some would call a conspiracy theory, it's about something that's at least debatable. For example, climate change. No matter what you believe about climate change, most people would have to agree there's still a debate going on. There is still a sizable portion of the population there that has doubts about climate change. I'm not aware of any sizable portion of the population that believes the Earth is flat, other than this small group, of course, the Flat Earth movement. Now,
interesting analogy. Climate change is obviously something that is a buzzword that's been used and spread across all mainstream media channels. There's no one that doesn't know this word, climate change. But what does it really mean? Climate change, the weather changes, and it's just one of those very broad sweeping terms that has been stuck in our heads and given kind of a negative connotation, much like I don't know, in the build up to the invasions of sovereign nations by the American military. The words weapons of mass destruction were bandied about at every opportunity until there was an association made in people's minds between weapons of mass destruction and nuclear weapons. And of course this was what Blair's speech basically comprised of, or was the linchpin, was this idea that Saddam Hussein could launch weapons of mass destruction without being very specific about what those weapons were within 20 minutes or something. And of course, in people's minds, it had been set that these weapons of mass destruction basically means nuclear weapons, but they never actually said that, but gave us the impression with other linguistic programming to give us that impression. Okay, that we went on for about climate change. So my point here is that okay, he said that he didn't know much about this flat Earth movement or debate. He didn't think it was a thing. Whereas, of course, you would be aware of something like 9/11 or climate change, because it is put out there in the mainstream media in order for people to debate it, because it's such a loose term that it can be that everyone will interpret it in their own way and have their own reasons for believing it, supporting it, or not supporting it, or thinking it's a load of rubbish or just a political tool or whatever. So, okay, you weren't aware of it, so this is obviously your kind of first look into it. Let's see what you made of it.
Some may look at this and say, this is really just skepticism. This is good. In the scientific community, we need to have skepticism. We need to look at theories and be flexible. We need to be willing to believe something different than we believed before if we see substantial evidence that moves in that direction. But that's not really what we're dealing with here.
Mm. Just before I respond, let me just make sure I got
Substantial evidence that moves in that direction. But that's not really what we're dealing with here when we talk about the flat Earth movement.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure what he's going to say next, but I think he's misunderstood there. Yes, I mean, we are demanding some science rather than just mathematical models, actual physics, proper science. And so, yes, it is, as he rightly points out, important to consider that we could have got our scientific theories wrong, and people should be ready for accepting that it could be different to how we imagined it. So, in a way, he's said that this kind of investigation into scientific investigation is a good thing, but he's obviously branding scientific investigation into the idea that the Earth is a globe as wrong.
Movement. This is beyond skepticism. This is really discounting all evidence. Now, another interesting point that aligns.
Okay, discounting all evidence. Okay, so not proof, but evidence. Maybe he's chosen a good word there, evidence. What is the evidence we're presented with? We are presented with a few so-called photographs of a globe Earth from space. And that's about it. Oh, 3 blokes went to the moon once. About 2 generations ago, apparently. Oh, and there's people bouncing around on the ISS, but we never see them go there. We never see any of this very dangerous journey to the ISS. And they always seem to have a constant supply of all the right gimmicks and clothes and costumes to wear for various occasions like Christmas, and gorilla suits and guitars and flutes and lots of things to eat and shampoo and yeah. Well, okay, so evidence, I think, all right, good choice of words, but yeah, the evidence is very much in question here. Especially when you see people tugging on wires. Okay.
Combines this with conspiracy theory.
Conspiracy theory. Well, yeah, you all know what I'm going to say about that. So, whatever. Conspiracy theory. Yeah.
Is if you look at the Flat Earth movement and kind of their core beliefs, they really seem to have a thing against NASA. And of course, NASA would be an agency that's gathered a lot of evidence that demonstrates the Earth is in fact spherical. So it makes sense they'd have to deal with NASA at some level in their belief system. But
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. That makes sense as an argument from an outsider that we would naturally have to trash NASA or other space agencies. Again, this is something you can realize flat Earth without NASA in the picture at all. You can do all the other research and studies and experiments and realize that without looking into NASA that they must be doing it in another way other than the way we've been taught or told it's happening up there in space. But obviously a great part of the research and investigations does revolve around the one single agency that claims to have done things that would essentially prove we live on a globe, like send people to the moon using orbital mechanics. And again, any investigation into that will reveal, in fact, Dr. Grande, I suggest you go and watch the press conference featuring the three astronauts after they apparently came back from the moon. And you have a look at their body language and their behavior and their mental disposition before and after the alleged moon landings, and see what you can make of it as a professional who is involved in this kind of thing. You do need an element of IQ and EQ to be combined to research the flat Earth properly and all the elements that go into it. So yes, NASA is a big part of it, but you do have to do extensive research and investigation. You don't just automatically jump on the hate NASA bandwagon. In fact, a lot of flat earthers were probably NASA fans earlier on, and it wasn't until they started questioning and scrutinizing the footage we are given and the evidence that we are handed that they then realized that something's not quite right with the things we're being told or shown. So yes, they are a target, but justifiably so.
But it's interesting because usually when we think of conspiracies, especially if we think of something that rises to a delusional level, and again, not everybody in this movement would be classified as delusional.
I wonder what's more delusional.
But if somebody were delusional, a lot of times when we look at delusions, we see agencies like the CIA mentioned, the FBI, a general distrust for the government, but not NASA. It's curious that they would target NASA and target their credibility. It makes sense to some degree to have a healthy distrust of the CIA or the FBI because they are in part a secret organization. NASA is not a secret organization, really. So I find this to be kind of an interesting facet. So this really counters this point that this is just healthy skepticism.
NASA's not a secret organization. Just try walking through the doors of NASA and see if you're allowed to peer into the records of their work. How much access can you have as a regular person to everything that they're doing? No secrets at NASA?
No, there is a real conspiracy theory component, I think, to the flat Earth movement. Also, we know members of this flat Earth movement, flat earthers, tend to believe in a lot of other conspiracy theories. So they may believe in this theory of the flat Earth, but they also have other theories, including the CIA and the FBI, and other more common conspiracy theories. Another thing I find interesting here is that there doesn't seem to be any amount of evidence that can convince a lot of these flat earthers that the world is in fact spherical. So of course there's pictures that NASA's taken and all that, and those are discounted. But even if you have other evidence, and of course there is an amazing amount of evidence supporting that the Earth is spherical, no evidence seems to rise to...
Okay, it's a common thought to have, or reaction to have, is that there is loads of evidence to support the Earth being a sphere. There isn't. There isn't any. Apart from the idea or the belief that a few men have walked on the moon and, I don't know, things like satellites are spinning around the Earth because we see lights in the sky and we can get TV signals. So I'm not sure whatever evidence you might believe there is, but this is a common misconception amongst people who have yet to even look for something like photographs of Earth from space or photographs of satellites in space, whatever. Start there. See how many you come up with.
Level of significant for many people in this group. So they really can't be swayed from this belief no matter what is put in front of them. If evidence is presented and it appears convincing, oftentimes they say it was fabricated. So we end up here in kind of a logical dead end where there's no way to really reason and move forward. So again, this is a departure from adhering to the scientific method. If these individuals were really committed to the scientific method, they would look at the evidence and at least be willing to consider that the Earth is spherical.
Really a very grave misunderstanding there, that flat earthers don't look into the evidence. I mean, people don't become flat earthers overnight. It can take weeks, months, years of investigation and looking at the evidence, the so-called evidence that we are given to have us believe that we live on a spinning ball Earth. So, no, you've made a very presumptuous assumption there, that a lot of people outside of this will make, assuming that flat earthers are ignorant or stupid, just too stupid to understand the idea that we can stick to the outside of a ball because of gravity and what have you. No. No one goes flat without doing some serious investigation, and especially going public with YouTube videos. I mean, we know that we're going to be open to ridicule by people who, like yourself, have maybe just come across it for the first time. So that's not a good statement to make. I had to stop the video just now and carrying on the next day. I'm not sure exactly where I left off, but let's just carry on listening to the good doctor here and make some more responses.
And that's not really what we see here. With this group, we also see this tendency to believe what's seen. At least that's how it's kind of framed. Like they believe evidence that they can see directly. Well, this is a pretty high burden of proof. A lot of us believe things that we can't see directly. We, at some level, take people's word for it. We take the word of scientists and other experts, but many people wouldn't have first-hand knowledge that the world is spherical. So this is a really high burden of proof, and they use what they call science, these experiments, in essence, to try to beat science. They would probably say to extend science or to advance science. But really, they're talking about first-hand observations only, and that's not everything that's included in the scientific method. The scientific method does involve a community that builds on knowledge, that runs experiments, that looks for replication, and shares information.
Okay, definitely agree with that point there, that science is a collaborative effort. No one person is ever going to be able to prove one thing or the other unless they have some very advanced way of measuring curvature, for example. But there is also there an appeal to authority, and the misunderstanding that is prevalent throughout most of the global community, that the shape of the Earth is something scientific. It's not. It's a mathematical model, and it is a choice interpretation of many possible interpretations just by looking up at the sky. So there is no measurement. And yes, the onus is on proponents of the globe Earth to belief to come up with scientific proof, actual measurements. So he mentioned just now that flat earthers demand kind of personal proof. And why not? This goes for anything in life, whether you're told something by anyone. You would like to find out for yourself whether what that person is telling you is true or not. So, yeah, this dependency on the scientific community is misplaced because, for one, the globe is not necessarily science, and the scientific community as a whole just goes along with this interpretation of observations in the sky that have been put upon us by the institutions, and you basically have to go along with it if you're going to become or get recognition as a scientist. Anyone, I'm sure there are many people in the scientific community who would and do go against the grain, but it takes a huge amount of effort, and they have to go through a lot. Often they go through ridicule, disbelief, other people ignoring them before the things they have discovered become accepted. So, yeah, don't assume that the scientific community has in any way done its due diligence in finding out that the Earth is a globe. No one ever discovered that the Earth was a globe. They just discovered a way to interpret what we see in the sky as us being on a spinning ball Earth, because it was decided to have the sun at the center and the Earth going around the sun, the heliocentric model. And of course, if you have a heliocentric model, then you have to imagine that the Earth is a spinning sphere in order to have day and night. When of course, if you have a local sun going around along with the moon, then you don't need the Earth to be moving, and you don't need to worry about how only half the Earth is lit up if the sun's very local. So on top of that, I think I'd say that most flat earthers have done a great deal of research and collaborated as a scientific community, as a collection, a gathering, a community of independent researchers, all looking into the things that interest them and that they have knowledge about. And the wonderful thing about the internet and YouTube is that we can now share this knowledge, and it doesn't have to be, it is peer reviewed like it is in a scientific institution. You'll have people very willing to review your work and add their 2 pence worth. So I'd say that really you see science in action when it comes to the flat earth proponents or globe earth investigators, flat earth researchers, debaters and debunkers. We are being scientific because we do pull each other up on different things. So let's just carry on. That's all I've got to say about that little point there.
What we really see here is a number of individuals going out and pursuing single experiments. Now, this may seem like science, and again, to some degree, there's a little bit of overlap, but it's really not the same thing. So what could be going on here in terms of...
Okay, it's a bit of a flippant dismissal. People, as I just explained, people going out and doing their own experiments in their own field of expertise, and that isn't any kind of contribution to science? Okay, so it's kind of fob that off. That's not really...
of personality or mental health in areas like this? Well, again, there could be nothing going on. Many of the members could simply look at this theory and be intrigued and join the movement and believe there's something to it. There doesn't have to be a delusion or an extreme personality trait at work. Now, with others, it could also be a sense of belonging. I think there's probably a financial incentive for people that run this. I don't know. I don't have any evidence to support this, but usually with some type of conspiracy theory that's organized, somebody's making money. There could also be some extreme personality traits in play here. Particularly, I would think low openness to experience, so being very rigid and dogmatic, although you could also argue very high openness to experience could get you to the same place through a different method, extended fantasy, creativity, and imagination. In terms of agreeableness, it could be low agreeableness, simply being a contrarian, looking at evidence and saying, no, I'm going to discount this evidence no matter what it is. So antagonistic, argumentative, that could be a possibility. In terms of mental health, there are a lot of...
Well, he's basically described traits that you will find in people in all walks of life and on either side of this argument. I'd say flat earthers or people looking into flat earth are less dogmatic than these hardline globe earth defenders. However, there are, of course, flat earthers who have basically swapped one belief for another. It may well be something to do with how they interpret scripture or other religious texts or ideas or beliefs, and for them there may be no need for rigorous scientific investigation because they believe in the word of the preacher. Personally, it was several months of investigation after becoming curious and at least listening what flat earthers like Eric Dubay and the NASA channel and others had to say, and then seeing if I could go out and confirm that for myself or find out how much truth there was in the things they were saying. And so that's how I personally became, if you want to add a label, a flat earther, or came to the realization that we are not on a globe spinning around the sun. The rest of it remains open to investigation, and I'm hoping that's what we can do, is continue to investigate where we are, who we are, and so, you know, investigations like this into the personality, the behavior is also, to me, a very important aspect of it, because you do see in the comments and the way some people will hide their faces, never reveal themselves, and stick to dogged, rigid beliefs. It's you get all sorts, just as you get in the global community. You have all manner of personalities, and you do so in the flat earth movement per se, or community. So and you have some very highly intelligent people, and you have some narcissistic people, you have all sorts of people. So you can't really define, and he kind of went over it there. He's really not labeling flat earthers as any particular mental type or mental health case. So okay, he's being reasonable there, I'd say.
Potential explanations: paranoid personality features, schizotypal personality features. So with paranoid, of course, we'd have people that are paranoid and distrustful. With schizotypal features, we would see somebody who has unusual thinking, odd beliefs, certainly consistent with the flat earth movement to some degree. Again, for some of the individuals that could be what's happening. And for some, it could just be a delusional situation. And we could see some of that with cluster A personality disorders like paranoid and schizotypal.
Ooh, delusional. No, I again, for the people that I believe are being very non-delusional about this is the acceptance that we have been deluded into believing certain things, and now we go back to basics. So there are no assumptions, there are no beliefs, there are no illusions or delusions about the way things are. But there is this desire, a thirst for knowledge, a desire to explore both our external environment and the inner landscape of our hearts, minds, behaviors. So, kind of lost the trail of what I was saying there. So maybe I covered what he already said. So let's see.
You could also see it with an illness like schizophrenia, and there's some other disorders as well that have a delusional component. And really, when we look at what qualifies as a delusion, it would be when somebody believes something is contrary to overwhelming, significant evidence.
Okay. Well, again, anyone who looks into flat Earth, anyone who researches, does look at the evidence, as we mentioned earlier on, the evidence provided by agencies such as NASA. And when you scrutinize the evidence and you see that it has been faked, quite frankly, then, and you realize that that's the only form of evidence that we actually have, then you realize that we were under a delusion. And so you can come out of that delusion by examining, studying, and scrutinizing the things we flippantly believed to be true just because that's what we've been told since we were young.
And that seems to be what's going on here some of the time. Again, there's a lot of reasons somebody could join an organization like this or have these beliefs. A delusional frame of mind would just be one of these reasons, the presence of delusions. Another bit of evidence that kind of points to the presence of delusions maybe in some of these instances would be if you look at the explanations of how the Earth is flat as opposed to spherical in this movement. The explanations defending the flat Earth model are extremely complex, much harder to believe, much more full of fantasy than the actual scientific explanations that we believe are true.
I've got to stop you there, Doctor. I'd say it's very, very simple. The explanations we are given for the heliocentric globe Earth model are very compartmentalized. They may appear to make sense by themselves when you just take one aspect, such as, I don't know, the shadow on the moon or something like that, and then offer this up as some kind of undeniable explanation as to the idea that we are on a spinning globe, etc., etc. We could come up with any kind of thing. The atmosphere sticking to the Earth while we also have a Coriolis effect. All these things like this that once scrutinized and when you try to put these things together, they do not fit. They do become very complex. So in order to, understanding that we're not on a spinning ball Earth is actually a complex process of going through those compartmentalized explanations and really seeing what can or cannot be proven or considered as evidence. And ultimately you realize that everything we've been told to interpret as being on a globe is nothing more than an assumption or an interpretation to go with the globe Earth model. So there might appear to be nothing complicated about the globe Earth model because it's simply the idea that we look up in the sky and we see planets and we assume that they have mass, and we assume that the Earth is another planet, and it all fits into place. We're in this solar system with all these balls going around it, and voila, there you have your model. And don't ask any questions about what's beyond the boundaries of infinite space. You just get, there still isn't an answer to these questions. So no, flat Earth really simplifies everything, because you reach an understanding or a realization that we don't know. And once you get down to it, it's very simple to discern the difference between what we believe and what we know. And it turns out that we know very little, but we believe a hell of a lot. So it is very simple, because you don't have to occupy your mind or do mental gymnastics with concepts and ideas that go beyond what we can and do experience in our physical reality. Of course, there is an element of the fact that we look around and we see intelligent design. That's an undeniable fact of the life on this plane, that we see intelligent design all around us. It doesn't mean that there's a benevolent designer per se. It just means that there is something of an extremely high intelligence going on in and around us that we cannot define in the frames of what we call science. So, of course, we can. I mean, we should be free to explore that, and yes, not believe or assume certain things are a certain way, but just take it at face value that we are in an intelligently designed environment, and we, although are fairly smart compared to the rest of the animals on this earth, there could be others that are much smarter than us, and we could be just a cog in the big mechanism of it all. So it is important to realize that, and this then takes away the attachment to this kind of superiority complex we have about the belief that we have it all sussed out, or certain scientists have given us all the answers to life, the universe, and everything, or mathematicians more like. So no, it's not complicated. Yes, there are infinite possibilities as to what this place could be, where we are, when we are, how it was created. The story we are given about everything coming from nothing and held together by gravity is just another creation story that doesn't really fit with physics or science anyway. It still doesn't answer those fundamental questions about the how, why, where, and when we are. So those are still open to interpretation, and that is the journey that we are on in this physical existence.
So the Earth is spherical, and its nature as being a sphere makes sense in terms of bodies orbiting the Earth and the Earth orbiting the Sun and all that. The flat Earth movement has to make up all of these really unusual mechanisms in terms of physics to explain how the Earth could be flat. And of course, one of the toughest would be, how come nobody's ever reached the end of the Earth and just driven off or sailed off? The popular explanation I hear for this is that NASA is guarding this wall of ice that exists at the edge of the Earth. So again, very fantastical explanations compared to what we actually know from science.
Okay, that's obviously a response from someone who hasn't clearly looked into it. I mean, it's not NASA that's stopping people exploring beyond Antarctica. It's the Antarctic Treaty, which is signed by a multitude of developed nations. So, and that's got nothing to do with the scientific community, really. That's a political thing. Or whatever. The point is that it's very difficult to go. So I'm afraid the good doctor needs to do a bit more research in that area. Of course, it would be great if a bunch of flat Earth researchers actually got together and attempted to make a journey to Antarctica and beyond. Of course, this is something that maybe could be done or attempted, but coordinating that, getting that together with a bunch of paranoid conspiracy theorists is going to be quite a challenge, I'm sure. But exploration, proper exploration, and again, that personal proof is something that's necessary to find out where we are. And again, there's talk of an edge. No, again, we make no real assumptions about an edge. I mean, there are maps that were created way before the flat Earth became popular on YouTube. So there was some reason for making those maps. There was obviously some knowledge put into those maps. Unfortunately, we cannot. We're not really in a position to verify that for ourselves unless we make our own expeditions. But again, this misunderstanding that flat earthers are talking about a frisbee in space or a pizza Earth or whatever. I mean, it's just no. The point is we don't know. We do not know the full dimensions, and I'd say to anyone, I've heard it from various globe Earth defenders who say that I know the Earth is a globe, especially pilots who claim to have been around the globe and that proves it. No one has ever fully circumnavigated the globe in all directions. No one's gone north to south and north again. Why not? Apparently we're sending rovers to Mars, but we can't even go around the bottom of our Earth. So talk of an edge is just uninformed assumptions, I'm afraid.
So the last thing I'll cover here is really what I initially thought when I heard the flat Earth movement. Remember, I initially thought that this can't be real. I didn't know this was a thing. I thought maybe this was a group of individuals who just wanted to call attention to how quickly we believe in what's popular, what's held by conventional science. We don't really question it, we just believe it. Turns out that doesn't seem, again, to be what this movement is about, but I think it's still an interesting point. It does make us pay attention to this idea of how do we know something's true? Are we a little too quick to just believe something? Somebody says something, we see it on TV, we see it on the internet, and we believe it. But maybe we should be a little more cautious, not to the point of discounting all evidence, but just healthy skepticism. So I think there are a lot of lessons to be learned from this flat Earth movement, and really the whole movement and everything we see here is fairly fascinating from a personality perspective, and again, potentially from a mental health perspective. I hope you found this discussion of the flat.
All right, well, okay, fair enough point there, and I would agree with you that it is a fascinating topic that reveals a lot about people's personalities and our belief system. So I'd suggest, Dr. Todd, that you continue to investigate and research the flat Earth. One little thing I'd like to just add about this. Let me just go to his list of videos
Well,
again.
this is Dr. Grande. Welcome.
It's interesting, isn't it, that we have these attempts to label what might be classified as disorders or describe what is normal. I mean, we have, again, the mention of borderline personality, bipolar disorder, gaslighting, extroversion, a whole range of labels for behaviors that are prevalent in human beings, and often in animals too, depending on how they were treated when they were young, the things they learned, a mixture of instinct and knowledge and experience all gets combined to create personality. Of course, we often, I suppose, we are born with a personality, but to label it as any specific thing is a very, very grey area. And really, the only true judge of anyone's state of mental health, I'd say, is the owner of the mind themselves. We cannot read minds. Whatever goes on in someone's mind is kept a secret unless it's revealed through various things like body language or just whatever subconscious things that come out, or even conscious decisions to look into who we are and how our minds work. And to me, that's what a lot of what Flat Earth is all about, because it forces us to examine our beliefs, forces us to try and see what we see. I'm constantly amazed by the people that appear not to get perspective, not to be able to understand that there's a translation from the things we see as an observer looking at the sun, moon and stars from the earth, and then translating that into this orthographic or side-on view of the observer, and how perspective has been translated into an imaginary curve. To me, it's really, it's just, I don't know, it's just obvious, but to try and explain that over and over again to people who, I still can't work it out. Are they refusing to get it? Do they really not see it? It's difficult to know, and it's difficult to ask the right questions to find answers that will satisfy the question. And so, yeah. When it comes to mental health and all these labels that are attached to it, it's interesting. Heard a talk recently by a guy who, I mean, research on psychopaths maybe started in about the 50s, and there were a few labels and behavioral traits attached to psychopaths. And over the decades, that has grown in enormous volumes to thousands of pages of descriptions and labels for what a psychopath is. So, I mean, it turns out that basically every single one of us has some element of psychopathy in us. And when you look at globalization, as it were, and the way the corporate world is run, that's very psychopathic. And the psychopaths are in charge of our daily lives. We are slaves to the psychopathic control system. So it's all very well going around labeling people with borderline this or antisocial that, and not maybe questioning what is the cause of that. Maybe the cause of all these ailments is, well, first of all, we've got this desire to label things, and that's very much apparent when it comes to trying to find out where we are in the universe. We love to have our labels. We love to have our numbers. The 93 million mile away sun, or the speeds and things that are the speed of light and things like that. They're all very desirable descriptions that people wish to have in order to solidify some kind of model or belief. And the other element I wanted to mention from that point was that yeah, we have all these labels, but you know, it is only when you look, it's only when we make the effort to look at our own minds, our own personality, that we can start to really discern. No one can tell you that you are this or you are that, you're a psychopath, you are borderline this or that. That's and these are all labels of ailments of people in a society or a community or a culture that believes they're on a spinning ball and are suffering at the hands of the psychopaths in charge. So if you know, flat Earth brings you back down to Earth. It doesn't. It's still very exciting because there is that awe and wonder of new discovery that can of infinite possibilities. Whereas if we're trapped in this kind of loop, orbit, if you like, of a very secular thing, then ideas and theories just go round and round and round, and we never get any answers. So I'd ask people like Dr. Todd, who, if he's obviously well read, and I'm sure he keeps up with the latest research, but one thing people can do to examine their own minds is simply to meditate, simply to sit and do nothing. Turn off the distractions. This is the main cause of stress. Are the distractions, are our ideas and impulses, our thoughts and our attachment to them. These are all things that create behavioral traits in us and affect our minds. But when we can sit and allow ourselves to watch our own minds as an observer, observe ourselves, observe our own mind, study our own mind, then it's only when you have a grip on your own mind that you can really start to properly reflect on the minds of others, and at the same time allow the minds of others to be the way they are. So there you go. Interesting to hear from a professional, and it's all good. It's all good. This is all helping to get people interested in reevaluating their beliefs, and that's all anyone can ask, is just to question what you believe, why we believe it, and whether it could be any different. Thank you very much.